Now let's talk about which editing software you should use. Now, all of the software programs out there for video editing are called NLEs, or non-linear editors. The reason they're called this is because you don't have to edit linearly like you used to have to with film, putting one clip after the other. You can actually edit in whichever direction you want, or you can start in the middle or start at the end, which is why they're called non-linear editors, or NLEs. Now, there's a bunch of different ones out there that you can use, but when it comes down to it, there's three main NLEs that you should consider using if you're a professional or even semi-professional editor. The two most popular ones are Adobe Premiere Pro and Apple's Final Cut Pro X. And then the other one that I would recommend considering is also DaVinci Resolve from Blackmagic. DaVinci Resolve is a newer entry to the market. It has been the go-to color grading software for years and years for professionals, and so it's really powerful on that front. But more recently, in recent years, they've added more editing features, and there's been a lot of editors that have started using it as well. So we'll talk about all three of those in this video, and let's go ahead and jump into it. So first, let's talk about Adobe Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro X, because both of these are very powerful software programs, but they're very different in a lot of key ways. So let's talk about some of the differences between the two. So if you're trying to decide which one you should use, you can kind of use this as a guide for deciding which one is the best for you. So the first thing to talk about when it comes to differences in Premiere and Final Cut, and probably the biggest thing, is the interface. Premiere has more of a functional interface, is what I would call it, and Final Cut has more of a pretty interface or user-friendly interface. Final Cut's edges are a little bit softer, more rounded corners, more kind of automatic features, where Adobe Premiere is kind of more straight edges, hard corners, just really kind of like rough on the edges type of thing. Just very clean and very utilitarian, very functional in the way that it works. But I kind of look at it like a automatic transmission car or a manual transmission car. In a manual transmission car, you have a lot more work that you have to do. It's maybe not as easy to drive. It doesn't do as many things for you, but you have a lot more control over ultimately what the car does, the torque to the wheels, how you're shifting gears, the transmission, and everything. Whereas in an automatic car, it kind of does all that stuff for you, which is really nice. It makes for a more relaxing drive. It's easier to drive, but it doesn't give you as much control over the car. So that's kind of like Premiere and Final Cut. Premiere is more like a manual transmission. It's maybe not as automatic. It doesn't do as many things for you, which as a professional user is actually, I think, a benefit of the software. I don't like the software kind of taking over too many of those tasks. I'll show you some examples in a second. But in Final Cut, it kind of takes over more of those things and does a lot more for you, but it doesn't give you as much control like Premiere does. Or at least with Final Cut, unlike Premiere, it's harder to take back that control. So a little simple example of this is just moving clips on a timeline. For example, in Premiere, I can take a clip and I can put it anywhere I want on the timeline. Whereas in Final Cut, if I try to put a clip later on the timeline, Final Cut's going to automatically snap the clip back to the beginning of the timeline or next to the most recent clip. Now, you can move clips around in Final Cut, but you do have to switch to another tool in order to do that. And this makes sense for a lot of people who are just getting into editing, like somebody who's editing a slideshow or photos of their kids or something like that. It makes a lot of sense because you don't want to have those accidental gaps. But as a professional user, you don't really want the software making those decisions for you and telling you that you're going to make mistakes and that they're trying to fix it for you. Instead, you want to have that full control and be able to put things wherever they want without having to switch to another tool to do that. That's just a small example of what I mean there. Now, when it comes to market share, Premiere Pro, from at least our polls and our testing of seeing what people are using in the filmmaker market, in our audience, about 50 to 60% of people are using Premiere Pro, and about 20 to 30% are using Final Cut, and then the rest are using something else. So that's something to consider. Not that it really matters, but if you are working on bigger production sets, it does seem to me that Premiere Pro is usually the go-to for big commercials and even feature films a lot of times. Because if you're working on those projects and you're using Premiere Pro, it's going to fit in with somebody else who is also using Premiere Pro. Now, if the other person is using Final Cut, then it doesn't really make a difference. So you're always going to kind of run into that. Ultimately, it would be best to just know how to use all the software, but at least for right now, Premiere Pro does have a bigger market share. The other big advantage from my perspective of Premiere Pro is that it has major compatibility with other software. So Adobe doesn't just make Premiere Pro, they also make all of the creative apps that most creatives use or most professionals use for their creative work. So they make Photoshop, they make Illustrator, they make After Effects, they make Audition, all of these different apps. And Premiere also has dynamic linking built in. So if you want to take a project or a clip from your Premiere Pro project and move it into After Effects to do motion graphics work, you can dynamic link it really, really easily. The same with Audition if you want to do audio work, and it links right back into your project, and it's extremely seamless. Now, if you don't have the subscription or don't have access to those other tools, then that's not really going to make a difference. Final Cut does have some of its own features as well built in for audio editing and for motion graphics. So they do have a motion application that you can buy, which is an additional cost. So you can get some of those features. However, Adobe's products are the best in the industry for all of those different tools. And lastly, and probably most importantly, we got to talk about price, because that's a major difference between Premiere and Final Cut. So Premiere and all of Adobe's applications all come with a subscription fee. So you have to pay a subscription monthly or yearly in order to have access to them. The advantage of that is that you automatically get all the updates as the software gets better and better, and you never have to buy another version of the software again in the future. So as your computer updates, as your software updates, it all kind of goes along together. So that's an advantage, but for a lot of people, it can be cost prohibitive having to pay that amount every single month in order to have access to software. So for Premiere Pro, it's around $20 a month in order to access the software. If you get the entire Adobe suite, which is what I do, I think it's the most valuable package out there. Is about $50 a month, and you get all of Adobe's services. Now, from my background in graphic design and music production, I use Illustrator and Photoshop and Audition and After Effects and all these programs pretty regularly, and so it makes sense for me to spend that $50 a month. I just see it as a cost of doing business as I'm running my business, and so I pay the $50 a month in order to have access to all those softwares. Now, for your situation, that may not make as much sense. Maybe you don't want to pay the subscription fee, and that's where Final Cut really shines. It's just a one-time payment of $299, and you get access to the software forever. The disadvantage to that, though, is if they come out with a new version of the software. And I'm not just talking about updates, because they do make updates every once in a while. But when they come out with a new version, you'll have to pay for it again. So there's a quick rundown on Final Cut versus Premiere Pro. Again, both are really good applications. It just depends on your preference and what you like to use. Now let's take a minute to talk about DaVinci Resolve as well. Because like I said, DaVinci Resolve has been the go-to color grading software for professionals for a long time, even today as well. Any professional colorist out there will use DaVinci Resolve. The coloring tools inside of Resolve are far better than anything that Premiere or Final Cut has. It's amazing for that. And then over the last couple of years, they've started adding in more editing tools and even some VFX tools and even audio tools as well. It seems like Blackmagic is trying to make DaVinci Resolve just kind of an all-in-one post-production system, which is really great. However, anytime you have an all-in-one system, or what they call a jack of all trades, a master of none, you end up with a lot of features that are just a little bit half-baked. And I think that's probably the biggest downfall for DaVinci Resolve. Like I said, though, Blackmagic is updating Resolve every year or twice a year or something like that. So it is getting better over time, and it could be that over the next few years it does become a very capable editor. But as of right now, I don't think it's the best option for editing. I go to Premiere Pro for that, but it is still, of course, the best color grading software. So if color is really, really important to you and you don't care so much about having the best maybe editing features, then I would definitely go with DaVinci Resolve, because you're going to get the best color grading tools in that software. But if you care more about editing and you're just doing some color grading on the side, then Final Cut or Premiere are going to work just fine with you. And don't think that you can't do amazing color inside of Premiere and Final Cut. They both work really well. Their tools are just a little bit more limited and not as robust and intuitive as what you get inside of Resolve. The other advantage of Resolve is that just like Final Cut, it is a one-time payment to buy the studio version, but they also have a free version of it, which gives you access to almost all of the features. So there's only a few things like high-resolution exports or noise reduction or some of the features that they take away that you don't get access to with the free version. But if you're looking to get started with it, it's really easy. You can just go download it from their website. You can get started. And then if you decide that that's the software that you want to use more professionally, it's just one payment of $299, just like Final Cut, to get the full studio version and have access to all of the features. All right, so there's a quick look at the top 3 editing software programs out there. I highly recommend checking out one of these. I know there are other programs out there like Avid Media Composer, which has been used in a lot of professional things. However, I don't see it being used as much anymore. There's also, cheaper options like iMovie if you're on a Mac, or Windows Movie Maker on a PC. And so there are free options out there. However, these 3 are definitely the top 3 that are being used and the most professional. Regardless of what software you're using, though, everything that I'm teaching in this course will apply to any software, because we're focusing here really on more of the editing techniques and methods and philosophies that I use in order to tell great stories and create really impactful edits. So you don't need to worry about that. You'll still be able to learn, even though I'm kind of teaching things primarily in Premiere Pro and talking primarily about Final Cut and Resolve as well. You can take the same things and adapt them to whatever software you're using if you're using something else. So there you go. Hope that was helpful, learning a little bit about editing software. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll see you on the next video.